Ansel Easton Adams was an American landscape photographer and environmentalist known for his black and white images of the American West. He helped found Group F/64, an association of photographers advocating pure photography which favored sharp focus and the use of the full tonal range of a photograph. He and Fred Archer developed an exacting system of image making called the zone system, a method of achieving a desired final print through a deeply technical understanding of how tonal range is recorded and developed during exposure, negative development, and printing. The resulting clarity and depth of such images characterized his photography. Adams was a lifelong advocate for environmental conservation, and his photographic practice was deeply entwined with this advocacy. At age 12, he was given his first camera during his first visit to Yosemite National Park. He developed his early photographic work as a member of the Sierra Club. He was later contracted with the United States Department of the Interior to make photographs of national parks. For his work and his persistent advocacy, which helped expand the national park system, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1980. Adams was a key advisor in establishing the photography department at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, an important landmark in securing photography's institutional legitimacy. He helped to stage that department's first photography exhibition, helped found the photography magazine Aperture, and co-founded the Center for Creative Photography at the University of Arizona. Early life. Birth. Adams was born in the Fillmore district of San Francisco, the only child of Charles Hitchcock Adams and Olive Bray. He was named after his uncle, Ansel Easton. His mother's family came from Baltimore, where his maternal grandfather had a successful freight hauling business but lost his wealth investing in failed mining and real estate ventures in Nevada. The Adams family came from New England, having migrated from the north of Ireland during the early 18th century. His paternal grandfather founded a prosperous lumber business which his father later managed. Later in life, Adams condemned the industry his grandfather worked in for cutting down many of the great redwood forests. Early childhood. One of Adams's earliest memories was watching the smoke from the fires caused by the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. Then 4 years old, Adams was uninjured in the initial shaking but was tossed face first into a garden wall during an aftershock 3 hours later, breaking and scarring his nose. A doctor recommended that his nose be reset once he reached maturity, but it remained crooked and necessitated mouth breathing for the rest of his life. In 1907, his family moved 2 miles west to a new home near the Seacliff neighborhood of San Francisco, just south of the Presidio Army Base. The home had a splendid view of the Golden Gate and the Marin Headlands. Adams was a hyperactive child and prone to frequent sickness and hypochondria. He had few friends, but his family home and surroundings on the heights facing the Golden Gate provided ample childhood activities. He had little patience for games or sports, but he enjoyed the beauty of nature from an early age, collecting bugs and exploring Lobos Creek all the way to Baker Beach and the sea cliffs leading to Land's End, San Francisco's wildest and rockiest coast, a place strewn with shipwrecks and rife with landslides. Early education. Adams's father had a 3-inch telescope, and they enthusiastically shared the hobby of astronomy, visiting the Lick Observatory on Mount Hamilton together. His father later served as the paid secretary-treasurer of the Astronomical Society of the Pacific. From 1925 to 1950. Charles Adams's business suffered large financial losses after the death of his father in the aftermath of the Panic of 1907. Some of the loss was due to his uncle Ansel Easton and Cedric Wright's father George secretly having sold their shares of the company, knowingly providing the controlling interest, to the Hawaiian Sugar Trust for a large amount of money. By 1912, the family's standard of living had dropped sharply. Adams was dismissed from several private schools for being restless and inattentive, so when he was 12, his father decided to remove him from school. For the next 2 years he was educated by private tutors, his Aunt Mary, and his father. Mary was a devotee of Robert G. Ingersoll, a 19th-century agnostic and women's suffrage advocate, so Ingersoll's teachings were important to his upbringing. During the Panama Pacific International Exposition in 1915, his father insisted that he spend part of each day studying the exhibits as part of his education. He eventually resumed, and completed, his formal education by attending the Mrs. Kate M. Wilkins Private School, graduating from the 8th grade on June 8, 1917. During his later years, he displayed his diploma in the guest bathroom of his home. His father raised him to follow the ideas of Ralph Waldo Emerson, to live a modest, moral life guided by a social responsibility to man and nature. Adams had a loving relationship with his father, but he had a distant relationship with his mother, who did not approve of his interest in photography. The day after her death in 1950, Ansel had a dispute with the undertaker when choosing the casket in which to bury her. He chose the cheapest in the room, a $260 coffin that seemed the least he could purchase without doing the job himself. The undertaker remarked, "Have you no respect for the dead?" Adams replied, "One more crack like that and I will take Mama elsewhere." Youth. Adams became interested in playing the piano at age 12 after hearing his 16-year-old neighbor Henry Cowell play on the Adamses' piano, and he taught himself to play and read music. Cowell, who later became a well-known avant-garde composer, gave Adams some lessons. Over the next decade, 3 music teachers pushed him to develop technique and discipline, and he became determined to pursue a career as a classical pianist. Adams first visited Yosemite National Park in 1916 with his family. He wrote of his first view of the valley, "The splendor of Yosemite burst upon us and it was glorious. One wonder after another descended upon us. There was light everywhere. A new era began for me." His father gave him his first camera during that stay, an Eastman Kodak Brownie box camera, and he took his first photographs with his usual hyperactive enthusiasm. He returned to Yosemite on his own the next year with better cameras and a tripod. During the winters of 1917 and 1918, he learned basic darkroom technique while working part-time for a San Francisco photograph finisher. Adams contracted the Spanish flu during the 1918 flu pandemic, from which he needed several weeks to recuperate. He read a book about lepers and became obsessed with cleanliness. He was afraid to touch anything without immediately washing his hands afterwards. Over the objections of his doctor, he prevailed on his parents to take him back to Yosemite, and the visit cured him of his disease and compulsions. Adams avidly read photography magazines, attended camera club meetings, and went to photography and art exhibits. He explored the High Sierra during summer and winter with retired geologist and amateur ornithologist Francis Holman, whom he called Uncle Frank. Holman taught him camping and climbing. However, their shared ignorance of safe climbing techniques such as belaying almost led to disaster on more than one occasion. While in Yosemite, Adams had need of a piano to practice on. A ranger introduced him to landscape painter Harry Best, who kept a studio home in Yosemite and lived there during the summers. Best allowed Adams to practice on his old square piano. Adams grew interested in Best's daughter Virginia and later married her. On her father's death in 1936, Virginia inherited the studio and continued to operate it until 1971. The studio is now known as the Ansel Adams Gallery and remains owned by the Adams family. Sierra Club and piano work. At age 17, Adams joined the Sierra Club, a group dedicated to protecting the wild places of the earth, and he was hired as the summer caretaker of the Sierra Club visitor facility in Yosemite Valley, the LeConte Memorial Lodge, from 1920 to 1923. He remained a member throughout his lifetime and served as a director, as did his wife. He was first elected to the Sierra Club's board of directors in 1934 and served on the board for 37 years. Adams participated in the club's annual high trips, later becoming assistant manager and official photographer for the trips. He is credited with several first ascents in the Sierra Nevada. During his 20s, most of his friends had musical associations, particularly violinist and amateur photographer Cedric Wright, who became his best friend as well as his philosophical and cultural mentor. Their shared philosophy was from Edward Carpenter's Towards Democracy, a literary work which endorsed the pursuit of beauty in life and art. For several years, Adams carried a pocket edition with him while at Yosemite, and it became his personal philosophy as well. He later stated, "I believe in beauty. I believe in stones and water, air and soil, people and their future and their fate." During summer, Adams would enjoy a life of hiking, camping, and photographing, and the rest of the year he worked to improve his piano playing, perfecting his piano technique and musical expression. He also gave piano lessons for extra income that allowed him to purchase a grand piano suitable to his musical ambitions. Adams was still planning a career in music. He felt that his small hands limited his repertoire, but qualified judges considered him a gifted pianist. However, when he formed the Milan V Trio with a violinist and a dancer, he proved a poor accompanist. It took 7 more years for him to conclude that, at best, he might become only a concert pianist of limited range, an accompanist, or a piano teacher. Photographic career. 1920s. Pictorialism. I monolith/I. None. 1930s. Pure photography. Sierra Nevada. Desert Southwest. 1940s. In 1940, Adams created a pageant of photography, the largest and most important photography show in the West to date, attended by millions of visitors. With his wife, Adams completed a children's book and the very successful illustrated guide to Yosemite Valley during 1940 and 1941. He also taught photography by giving workshops in Detroit. Adams also began his first serious stint of teaching, which included the training of military photographers, in 1941 at the Art Center School of Los Angeles, now known as the Art Center College of Design. Mural Project. I Moonrise/I. None. World War II. 1950s. In 1952 Adams was one of the founders of the magazine Aperture, which was intended as a serious journal of photography, displaying its best practitioners and newest innovations. He was also a contributor to Arizona Highways, a photo-rich travel magazine. His article on Mission San Xavier del Bac, with text by longtime friend Nancy Newhall, was enlarged into a book published in 1954. This was the first of many collaborations with her. In June 1955, Adams began his annual workshops at Yosemite. They continued to 1981, attracting thousands of students. He continued with commercial assignments for another 20 years, and became a consultant, with a monthly retainer, for Polaroid Corporation, which was founded by good friend Edwin Land. He made thousands of photographs with Polaroid products, El Capitan, Winter, Sunrise being the one he considered most memorable. During the final 20 years of his life, the 6x6 cm medium format Hasselblad was his camera of choice, with Moon and Half Dome being his favorite photograph made with that brand of camera. Adams published his fourth portfolio, What Majestic Word, in 1963, and dedicated it to the memory of his Sierra Club friend Russell Varian, who was a co-inventor of the klystron and who had died in 1959. The title was taken from the poem Sand Dunes, by John Varian, Russell's father, and the 15 photographs were accompanied by the writings of both John and Russell Varian. Russell's widow, Dorothy, wrote the preface, and explained that the photographs were selected to serve as interpretations of the character of Russell Varian. Later career. By the 1960s, Adams had developed gout and arthritis and hoped that moving to a new home would make him feel better. He and his wife considered Santa Fe, but they both had commitments in California. A friend offered to sell them property in Carmel Highlands, overlooking the Big Sur coastline. With architect Eldridge Spencer, they began planning the new home in 1961 and moved there in 1965. Adams began to devote much of his time to printing the backlog of negatives that had accumulated over 40 years. In the 1960s, a few mainstream art galleries that had considered photography unworthy of exhibit alongside fine paintings decided to show Adams's images, particularly the former Kenmore Gallery in Philadelphia. In March 1963, Ansel Adams and Nancy Newhall accepted a commission from Clark Kerr, the president of the University of California, to produce a series of photographs of the university's campuses to commemorate its centennial celebration. The collection, titled Fiat Lux after the university's motto, was published in 1967 and now resides in the Museum of Photography at the University of California, Riverside. During the 1970s, Adams reprinted negatives from his vault, in part to satisfy the demand of art museums that had recently established departments of photography. In 1972, Adams contributed images to help publicize Proposition 20, which authorized the state to regulate development along portions of the California coast. In 1974, he exhibited at the Rencontres d'Arles, an annual summer photography festival in France. He also had a major retrospective exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. In 1975, he co-founded the Center for Creative Photography at the University of Arizona, which handles some of his estate matters. In 1979, President Jimmy Carter commissioned Adams to make the first official photographic portrait of a U.S. president. Death and legacy. Adams died from cardiovascular disease on April 22, 1984, in the intensive care unit at the Community Hospital of the Monterey Peninsula in Monterey, California, at age 82. He was surrounded by his wife, children Michael and Anne, and 5 grandchildren. His body was cremated and his ashes were scattered on the Half Dome at Yosemite National Park. Publishing rights for most of Adams's photographs are handled by the trustees of the Ansel Adams Publishing Rights Trust. An archive of Adams's work is located at the Center for Creative Photography at the University of Arizona in Tucson. Numerous works by the artist have been sold at auction, including a mural-sized print of Clearing Winter Storm, Yosemite National Park, which sold at Sotheby's, New York in June 2010 for $722,500, then the highest price ever paid for an original Ansel Adams photograph. This price was surpassed by another mural-sized print of one of his photographs, The Tetons and the Snake River, sold for $988,000 at Sotheby's, New York, on December 14, 2020. John Sarkowski states in the introduction to Ansel Adams, Classic Images, the love that Americans poured out for the work and person of Ansel Adams during his old age, and that they have continued to express with undiminished enthusiasm since his death, is an extraordinary phenomenon, perhaps even unparalleled in our country's response to a visual artist. Contributions and influence. Landscapes of the American West. Romantic landscape artists Albert Bierstadt and Thomas Moran portrayed the Grand Canyon and Yosemite during the 19th century, followed by photographers Carlton Watkins, Edward Muybridge, and George Fiske. Adams's work is distinguished from theirs by his interest in the transient and ephemeral. He photographed at varying times of the day and of the year, capturing the landscape's changing light and atmosphere. Art critic John Sarkowski wrote, Ansel Adams attuned himself more precisely than any photographer before him to a visual understanding of the specific quality of the light that fell on a specific place at a specific moment. For Adams, the natural landscape is not a fixed and solid sculpture but an insubstantial image, as transient as the light that continually redefines it. This sensibility to the specificity of light was the motive that forced Adams to develop his legendary photographic technique. The creation of Adams's grand, highly detailed images was driven by his interest in the natural environment. With increasing environmental degradation in the West during the 20th century, his photos show a commitment to conservation. His black and white photographs were not just documentation, but reflected a sublime experience of nature as a spiritual place. In 1955, Edward Steichen selected Adams's Mount Williamson for the World Touring Museum of Modern Art exhibition The Family of Man, which was seen by 9 million visitors. At 10 by 12 feet, his was the largest print in the exhibition, presented floor to ceiling in a prominent position as the backdrop to the section Relationships, as a reminder of the essential reliance of humanity on the soil. However, despite its striking and prominent display, Adams expressed displeasure at the gross enlargement and poor quality of the print. Group F/64. In 1932, Adams helped form the anti-pictorialist Group F/64, a loose and relatively short-lived association of like-minded straight or pure photographers on the West Coast whose members included Edward Weston and Imogen Cunningham. The modernist group favored sharp focus F/64 being a very small aperture setting that gives great depth of field on large format view cameras, contact printing, precisely exposed images of natural forms and found objects, and the use of the entire tonal range of a photograph. Adams wrote the group's manifesto for their exhibition at the De Young Museum. Group F/64 limits its members and invitational names to those workers who are striving to define photography as an art form by a simple and direct presentation through purely photographic methods. The group will show no work at any time that does not conform to its standards of pure photography. Pure photography is defined as possessing no qualities of composition or ideas, derivative of any other art form. The production of the pictorialist, on the other hand, indicates a devotion to principles of art, which are directly related to painting and the graphic arts. The members of Group F/64 believe that photography, as an art form, must develop along lines defined by the actualities and limitations of the photographic medium, and must always remain independent of ideological conventions of art and aesthetics that are reminiscent of a period of culture antedating the growth of the medium itself. The F/64 school met with opposition from the pictorialists, particularly William Mortenson, who called their work hard and brittle. Adams disliked the work of Mortenson and disliked him personally, referring to him as the Antichrist. The purists were friends with prominent historians, and their influence led to the exclusion of Mortenson from histories of photography. Adams later developed this purist approach into the zone system. The zone system. While Adams and portrait photographer Fred Archer were teaching at the Art Center School in Los Angeles, around 1939–1940, they developed the zone system for managing the photographic process, which was based on sensitometry, the study of the light sensitivity of photographic materials and the relationship between exposure time and the resulting density on a negative. The zone system provides a calibrated scale of brightness, from zone 0 through shades of gray to zone X. The photographer can take light readings of key elements in a scene and use the zone system to determine how the film must be exposed, developed, and printed to achieve the desired brightness or darkness in the final image. Although it originated for black and white sheet film, the zone system can be applied to images captured on roll film, both black and white, and color, negative and reversal, and to digital photography. Photography Department at MoMA. In 1940, with trustee David H. McAlpin and curator Beaumont Newhall, Adams helped establish the photography department at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. MoMA was the first major American art museum to establish a photography department. Adams acted as McAlpin and Newhall's primary advisor, Peter Galassi, the chief curator of the department in later years, said Adams's dedication and boundless energy were vital to the creation of the department and to its programs in its early years. For those who had sought institutional recognition for photography as art, the founding of the department was an important moment, marking the medium's recognition as a subject equal to painting and sculpture. On December 31, 1940, the department opened its first exhibition, 60 Photographs, a survey of camera aesthetics, which resembled large survey exhibitions that Adams and Newhall had previously mounted independently. The exhibition took aesthetic quality as a guiding principle, a philosophy that ran counter to that of many writers and critics, who argued that the medium's more vernacular use as a means of communication should be more fully represented. Photographer Ralph Steiner, writing for PM, remarked, "On the whole it seems to regard photography as soft music at high tea rather than as a jazz at a beefsteak supper." Tom Maloney, publisher of U.S. Camera, wrote that the exhibition was very choice, very pristine, very small, very ultra. According to Newhall, the exhibition was meant to showcase artistic excellence and not to define but to suggest the possibilities of photographic vision. Environmental protection. In his autobiography, Adams expressed his concern about Americans' loss of connection to nature in the course of industrialization and the exploitation of the land's natural resources. He stated, "We all know the tragedy of the Dust Bowls, the cruel unforgivable erosions of the soil, the depletion of fish or game, and the shrinking of the noble forests. And we know that such catastrophes shrivel the spirit of the people. The wilderness is pushed back, man is everywhere. Solitude, so vital to the individual man, is almost nowhere." Awards and honors. Adams received a number of awards during his lifetime and posthumously, and several awards and places have been named in his honor. For his photography, Adams received an honorary fellowship of the Royal Photographic Society in 1976 and the Hasselblad Award in 1981. Two of his photographs, the Tetons and the Snake River and a view of the Golden Gate Bridge from Baker Beach, were among the 115 images recorded on the Voyager Golden Record aboard the Voyager spacecraft. These images were selected to convey information about humans, plants, and animals, and geological features of the Earth to a possibly alien civilization. For his conservation efforts, Adams received the Sierra Club John Muir Award in 1963. In 1968, he was awarded the Conservation Service Award, the highest award of the Department of the Interior. In 1980, President Jimmy Carter awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, for his efforts to preserve this country's wild and scenic areas, both on film and on Earth. Drawn to the beauty of nature's monuments, he is regarded by environmentalists as a national institution. Adams received an honorary Artium Doctor degree from Harvard University and an honorary Doctor of Fine Arts degree from Yale University. He was elected a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1966. In 2007, he was inducted into the California Hall of Fame by California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger and First Lady Maria Shriver. The Sierra Club's Ansel Adams Award for Conservation Photography was established in 1971, and the Ansel Adams Award for Conservation was established in 1980 by the Wilderness Society, which also has a large permanent gallery of his work on display at its Washington, D.C. headquarters. The Minarets Wilderness in the Inyo National Forest and a 11,760-foot peak therein were renamed the Ansel Adams Wilderness and Mount Ansel Adams, respectively, in 1985. In 1984 Adams was inducted into the International Photography Hall of Fame. Photographs. Color images. Adams was known mostly for his boldly printed, large-format black and white images, but he also worked extensively with color. However, he preferred black and white photography, which he believed could be manipulated to produce a wide range of bold, expressive tones, and he felt constricted by the rigidity of the color process. Most of his color work was done on assignments, and he did not consider his color work to be important or expressive, even explicitly forbidding any posthumous exploitation of his color work. Notable photographs: Lodgepole Pines, Lyell Fork of the Merced River, Yosemite National Park, 1921. Monolith, The Face of Half Dome, Yosemite National Park, 1927. Rose and Driftwood, San Francisco, California, 1932. Georgia O'Keeffe and Orville Cox, Canyon de Chelly National Monument, 1937. Clearing Winter Storm, Yosemite National Park, c. 1937. Moonrise, Hernandez, New Mexico, 1941. Evening, McDonald Lake, Glacier National Park, 1942. The Tetons and the Snake River, Grand Teton National Park, 1942. Winter Sunrise, Sierra Nevada, from Lone Pine, California, 1944. Mount Williamson, Sierra Nevada, from Manzanar, California, 1944. Aspens, Northern New Mexico, 1958. Moon and Half Dome, Yosemite National Park, California, 1960. El Capitan, Winter Sunrise, 1968. Published works: Adams, Ansel. Basic Photo. New York, Morgan and Lester. Adams, Ansel. The Negative, Exposure and Development. New York, London, Morgan and Lester, The Fountain Press. Adams, Ansel. The Print, Contact Printing and Enlarging. Boston, New York Graphic Society. ISBN 978-0-8212-0718-5. Adams, Ansel. Camera and Lens, The Creative Approach, Studio, Laboratory, and Operation. ISBN 978-87100-056-9. Adams, Ansel. Images 1923–1974. Boston, New York Graphic Society. ISBN 978-0-8212-0600-3. Adams, Ansel. Natural Light Photography. Little, Brown & Co., for New York Graphic Society. ISBN 978-0-8212-0719-2. Adams, Ansel, Baker, Robert. Polaroid Land Photography. Boston, New York Graphic Society. ISBN 978-0-8212-0729-1. Adams, Ansel. Yosemite and the Range of Light. Boston, New York Graphic Society. ISBN 978-0-8212-0750-5. Camera equipment. Most of Adams' best-known images were taken with 8x10 and 4x5 view cameras. He also used a variety of other negative formats, from 35mm and medium-format roll film through less common formats such as Polaroid Type 55 and 7x17 panoramic cameras. The 1958 documentary Ansel Adams, Photographer, narrated by Beaumont Newhall, gives an overview of Ansel's toolkit at the time, with some examples of his camera outfits including 8x10 view camera, 20 holders, 4 lenses, 1 Cook convertible, 1 10-inch wide field Ector, 1 9-inch Dager, 1 6-3/4-inch Wollensak wide angle, 7x17 special panorama camera with a Protar 13-1/2-inch lens and 5 holders, 4x5 view camera, 6 lenses, 12-inch collinear, 8-1/2 Oppo Lantar, 9-1/4 Oppo Tessar, 4-inch wide field Ector, Dalmyer London Telephoto. Adams mounted a platform on the roof of his car to allow him to take images with the view cameras from an elevated point of view. See also: environmental protection, monochrome photography. Explanatory notes. Citations. General and cited references. Further reading. Biographies. None.